what is the break-even point at which refinancing or rate adjustments of your home mortgage makes sense? Also, do we expect mortgage rates to drop this year?
All right, I'll do break-even point. You do mortgage rates. Yeah, so a lot of people are surprised to hear this, Aaron. It's really a mathematical calculation when you decide, does refinancing make sense or does it not make sense? And here's the way that you want to recalculate it. Let's say that you bought a house and you were in a 30-year mortgage and now you're 5 years into it. So you have 25 years left on the mortgage. That's important because I'm going to come back to that. You decide I'm going to refinance. Well, most of the times when you refinance, you're going to refinance into a new 30-year mortgage. So what you're actually doing is you're kicking your payment period out 5 more years. So instead of paying off that house in 30 years, you're paying it off over 35. You want to be careful of doing that because all you're going to do is end up just stretching out the amortization of that loan. So here's where you do the math to determine what the break-even point is. You know what your interest rate is today, so you can calculate how much interest you're paying on your monthly payment. Well, then you calculate, okay, what would my new payment be with a lower interest rate if I were going to continue paying on the exact same schedule? Meaning I was going to pay it off in that same 25 years, not stretch it out to an additional 30 years. What I want to calculate is what is the interest savings if I'm going from 7% down to 6% or 8% down to 7%. What is the monthly interest savings that I'm going to accumulate every month as I continue to make those payments? Well, then I want to figure out if I add up all of those interest payments, how much time does it take me to save enough interest to compensate me for the cost of the refinance? So whatever the closing costs were for me to work through that, I want to make sure that I have a reasonable belief I'm going to be in the house long enough to recoup that initial cost. So you might figure out, okay, I'm going to have enough in interest savings, keeping the same timeline to where I have to live in this house for at least 48 months before I cover what the refinance cost was. Well, if you're going to be there for more than 48 months, refinancing likely makes sense. If you determine it's going to take 10 years to make up the interest savings, then it might not make sense if you don't see yourself being in that house 10 years in the future. That's how I would work through the calculation of the break-even analysis. Now, what I'm curious about is, what does that mean that anytime rates drop, should you just refinance willy-nilly?
Well, I was just glad because you're right. Even if you have the payoff period stay the same, because you change the variables, there's a chance your payment still goes down.
Sure. Yep.
Just because you have less principal you're refinancing and bringing it back. I always challenge people, if it's not a cash flow issue, I love it if you just keep paying the same thing you were paying
same payment,
with now the same rate, and you that goes beyond the break even point. It's more of a discipline thing. People, because a lot of times people in the comment section will say, I don't trust the typical person because they're just go refinance and then they go take all the money savings and just go blow it on something else. I think better of you guys because you're financial mutants, you're watching content like this. So it's more of an optimization strategy to figure out how do you get the lower interest rate and actually turn that into measurable wealth or speed up your journey. So just make sure you're taking that margin that you get from the refinance and not expand it into lifestyle or other things. Now, to the other question. Do I think interest rates are going to go down? Man, that is a big one because now look, President Trump is new on the scene, and there was even a journalist last week I saw said, "Do you think that the Fed is going to cut rates just because you told them?" And now his confidence was yes, but I don't really know. I mean, and that's the reality of the situation is because we keep watching the inflation data to see how much, because look, it was starting to rear its head that maybe we had not vanquished inflation like we thought we had, but then our most recent data point was actually pretty good. But it's a big question mark. I will say that they have definitely lowered the temperature on how many rate cuts there will be going forward, just because it seems like the economy is pretty hot. Now, there's an element that has not been discussed is that if goods get more affordable, we'll see what happens. But I don't know. There's a lot of variables. It's too soon to know. But I sure hope that interest rates go down because I would love people to be able to buy homes. And I think it would be reasonable if interest rates were in the 5s.
So if rates do go down, Brian, I mean, how do you decide? If I'm someone who got 6 or 7% mortgage and rates have gone down and now I can refinance at 6.75, does that make sense, or do I keep waiting? Like, how do I go
you
through
typically, I mean, I think a good practice is you do the math. I mean, because maybe you can make 0.75% work, but usually a good rule of thumb is like once it gets below 1%, 1% savings. And then you also, once you get over 1%, you can start letting the lender prepay some of give you a little bit of a premium on the interest rate and then cover the cost for you. There's all kind of opportunities to do that, but you need some type of spread. If it's just 0.25%, I don't know that you're getting over the hassle or the friction costs of doing the refinance. But once you get over, 1% and greater, it can be pretty fruitful.
Aaron, I would encourage you, if you go out to moneyguy.com/resources, we actually have a refinance guide that you can go use. It'll help walk you through some of the stuff. Okay, how do I calculate it? Does it make sense? Is this something that could make sense for me? So if you've not checked that out, moneyguy.com/resources, and it's our refinance guide to help you figure out how to make that decision.